Well, good. Well, thank you all for coming this evening. Welcome to Capital Factory. Just one quick question. How many of you have never been here before? Wow. Wow. A lot of newbies in our midst. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for making the trek down. Hope it wasn't too hard to find us up here in the Skyway. My name is Fred Schmidt. I'm one of the partners and mentors here at Capital Factory for about the last couple of years. Started out just doing some co-working, and next thing I know, I got sucked in deep. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a minute and each of our guests this evening. But first of all, a little bit of housekeeping before we get into this, just so you know where everything is. This is kind of a casual event, so as we're talking, feel free to get up and refresh your drink if you like, or if you need to use the restroom. I mean, don't be self-conscious about that kind of thing. Restrooms, just so you know, are out the back door and back to the front desk where you were, to the left of the front desk, and at the end of that short hallway, the ladies is just to your right, the men's is just to your left. Okay. We have internet here. If there's anything you need to do on the interweb kind of thingy, the access here, it's Capital Factory Guests, and the password is the factory, all lowercase. Okay. And let's see here. Oh yeah, and we are also filming this evening, just so you all know. Hopefully everybody's comfortable with that. If you're not, you can sit in the back row and over in the corners, and you won't get in the and the reason we do that is because at Capital Factory, we also have something called Capital Factory University. And so that is for the benefit of many, many companies. We've got about 200 companies here, about 650 employees and contractors and people going through those programs and with the different companies as they're growing. We have 2 floors. This is just one floor, the 16th floor. We've now grown to also have the 5th floor, which is under remodeling right now. So we've got everybody crammed into half the 5th floor. Then we're going to expand and take over the whole 5th floor. And so a lot of very exciting things happening here as we grow. But the number of people that we have coming through here obviously requires that, we have a little bit of logistics that we're dealing with all the time, just because there's so much activity. Every evening, this is just one event. We usually have another thing going on over in the co-working space, something else going on in the kitchen. So it's a real community center of activity in the tech and entrepreneurial community here. So again, thank you all very, very much for coming. And so what I was saying with the filming is just so that the companies and the employees that are here who can't come to all of the different sessions and events, we try to chronicle and document and archive as much of the activity that takes place here, and then they can call it up online at their convenience and still partake in the information that was shared. So thank you very much for all of that. So any quick questions before I dive in? Anything on the top of your mind that I didn't cover from a housekeeping standpoint? Yes, no? Okay, good. All right, well, so I'm going to launch into the program here. So we've got a great group of speakers this evening that's going to talk about the topic of London and the UK, okay? And off the back of that, it's going to go in a variety of directions because of who all these individuals are and what their relative experiences are, and the things that we want to impart to you in this relationship that's going on between Austin and London. A lot of very, very exciting things happening. One thing that most people don't know is that Austin is actually a formal sister city with the London borough of Hackney. And Hackney, if you don't know where that is, it's in East London, and it's one of 32 boroughs, I believe, in the greater London area. 33, okay, this one. They didn't count anyway. So Hackney is the home of what has become known now. It's really broader than just Hackney, but it's kind of the epicenter of what is known as Tech City. And so a few years ago, like 5 to 8 years ago, there were a few hundred tech companies that had migrated there because it was cheaper rent, and kind of a cool creative scene was starting to grow there. Some artists, writers, and musicians, the usual minstrel canaries that make a place fun, were over there mixing with the immigrants that were just trying to keep the place alive. The usual mix in many urban centers. And the place started to really take on a personality, and then the tech industry started moving in. Well, now there is easily, I don't think there's any good real quantification going on. I don't know if you've got a real number, Richard.
I would say over 3,000.
That's what I say too, but I think it's really more than that, because I've been saying that for about a year, and it just keeps flourishing. But there's several thousand now tech companies all located in that area. Facebook has put their headquarters over in that side of town. Google has a big Google campus, all kinds of stuff happening. So I went over there 3 years ago on as a tech company CEO on a digital trade mission with Mayor Leffingwell from Austin, just to discover what was going on in London. And next thing I know, we're signing something called a Friendship Cities Agreement, and somehow I got put in charge as a volunteer, okay? And so out of this little volunteer role, kind of helping grow some relationship that I knew nothing about between Austin and London, we now have grown this to where we've got about 400 different companies and universities and people and organizations. I just partnered the church that's right next door here, St. David's Episcopal Church, with St. John of Hackney in the London borough of Hackney, because they're both community centers, music venues during stuff. Here we've had musicians perform for South by Southwest. There they've had Coldplay, and Sinead O'Connor has performed in this church. So just really great synergy and great vibe that has occurred between Austin and Hackney. And Hackney is just our gateway. If you think of Brooklyn and Williamsburg as it applies to New York and Manhattan, London, if we showed up and said, hey, Austin wants to partner with London, they probably would have said, I'm sorry, you're not a world-class city, Paris, Hong Kong, we'll talk. But Austin, I don't think so. So we snuck in the back door, okay, because Hackney is the only other borough that has its own mayoral form of government, so we could do a deal between the two mayors. And so through that, we now have an entree point from Austin to really come into the entire London market, through London into the UK, and through the UK into the EU. And that's really going to be the topic of our discussions this evening. So real quick, my background is I'm a 30-year bricks and clicks entrepreneur. I run retail businesses in town in music, art, fashion, and toys. And then I've also been in the video game business for 25 years and have been part of a number of different video game companies. Microprose Software that was in Baltimore, Washington, but IPO back in the late 80s, and then Origin Systems here in Austin started the game industry. We sold that to Electronic Arts, and then we spun up NCSoft Corporation, which is based in Seoul, Korea, set up their North American headquarters here in Austin and their European offices in Brighton, UK. I was the guy, I'm a European by birth in Poland, and so I always get sent to Europe. Okay, we're gonna go conquer Europe. You gotta go again. So off I go. And so that's why I've been asked to kind of host this thing, is because I've kind of done this thing a few times. So that's kind of my background. I'm also, as I said, a partner here at Capital Factory, and I'm not going to tell you about it now because otherwise I'd have to kill you all. I'm sure he's got some of that kind of news too. I think hers is coming out next week, but she's going to tease you too. But I've also taken on a greater role here at Capital Factory as the Director of International. What does that mean? Ooh, we don't have one of those. Well, we do now. And so I am spinning up over the next several months a whole international program here at Capital Factory to do two things. One is to become a full-service soft landing facility for international startups and tech companies from all over the world coming into the U.S. market that want to be in Austin. And this is really a complement to, we've got Marco Bravo de Silva here from IC Squared and ATI. They've been doing it for like 25 to 40 years in the education and the commercialization of R&D space, but we don't have anything that's really capturing startup entrepreneurialism. So Capital Factory is getting into that business to provide some of those services. We've got Tech Ranch in town that does a great job at international here. The International Accelerator is another program that's spinning up. Sherry's got Innovation Station she's going to tell you about. So international has now come of age in Austin as we go forward, and so some very, very exciting things that we'll be telling you about. But anyway, so we got people coming here. Tonight's conversation is a little bit about kind of when we're ready for companies from here to go there, how do you do that and why? So we're going to kick off with a little discussion about just what the scene is in London from a guy who has spent a lot of time there. And so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about, real briefly before I get into an individual introduction, just real quickly, if you just say your name, where you're from, and kind of what you do, and then I've got a whole introduction for you, so get too deep into it.
I think we could probably skip those, but
No. We got to. I got a good one for you, Worley. I'm not skipping it.
They're different. Every event I go to, they always ask for a bio. I never send them one, and they make one up. So they're like, all.
Well, you see what somebody made up.
To hear what they are. I'm like, none of that is true.
Oh yeah.
But my name is Worley. I'm one of the founders of Catting here in Austin. We do a bunch of mobile and advanced tech for big brands, and I moved to Austin in '93 to work for Apple Computer, and eventually ended up in R&D there. And then I moved to IBM along with Sebastian Hassinger, who's hiding back there, and we did a bunch of really interesting work there. We both were awarded the Master Inventor title, and did a bunch of patent work and really interesting work in system management and things of that nature. And did a bunch of work in between there. Ended up, starting Chaotic 4.5 years ago now, and it's been great. And we've been in London quite a bit recently.
You have. He was on the inaugural British Airways flight that came into town, brought a whole bunch of our Hackney people in for South by Southwest this year. They were landed into a press conference, okay? I mean, off the plane into a full-blown press conference, cameras, TVs. I warned them all. I mean, it's not going to be your usual, immigration, naturalization kind of welcome. Great, thank you. Lou.
Yeah, so I'm
over to you.
That's interesting. So my name is Lou Advisi. I am the general counsel of Retail Me Not Inc. here in Austin. So before that, I was sort of turning private practice doing venture capital and M&A work. And so came to Austin in 2000, I guess. So back for since had a couple of my colleagues were on the plane with Worley apparently.
A lot of them. And they were well branded.
Yeah.
There's a hackathon there.
Yeah. They were smart. They didn't look a lawyer on the plane.
You just tell them to quit doing everything they're doing, right? That's never going to fly. We can't protect that, right?
Exactly.
Good.
Hi.
Well, thanks, Lou. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Glass, and my company is Glass Talent Strategies. I'm a strategist, and I'm excited that I get to work with a couple of different companies actually in London right now, helping them really set their vision and their strategy all the way to execution, and I do executive coaching. And some exciting stuff. I'm working with a CIO over there that's doing some turnaround, and she's taking people all over to like San Francisco, her whole executive team. I'm like, you gotta come to Austin. So they're doing a lot of exciting stuff around tech there. My other sort of global experience besides the brands that I work with now was 11 years at Starbucks through about 1,200% growth. When I started, there was 1,400 stores, and left when there was over 16,000. And part of that was 2 years launching the brand in London. So if you
most of that just was so London could have internet connectivity.
Well, we were just saying, both of us lived there, right? When there was no internet. The Zoom was happening over here, and it was pretty interesting.
I remember going, running Starbucks to Starbucks, just trying to download some more email, before I got kicked off again.
So I have some, in-house experience in terms of scaling, and also now I get to work with companies that are doing that as well.
Cool. Good to have you here, Linda.
Thank you.
And Sherry, tell us your story.
Well, not too long here, but Sherry Wynn Wrestler, and I'm here kind of with two hats on. One as an attorney, and we have a very heavy attorney panel, but also here to say that just because you're an attorney doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur. I actually I left a 1,300 lawyer law firm to move to Austin in 1996 when entrepreneurship and startup wasn't really popular. It was kind of empty downtown when I think about it. And but I really wanted to start a practice that would be, in a sense, a legal consultancy where we could really help entrepreneurs be successful and give them the resources and the know-how to succeed. And that has happened through our law firm. The law firm's 19 years old now, and we represent and connect entrepreneurs and investors and equip innovators for success. And as part of that practice, really an offshoot of that practice is a few years ago, one of the things I noticed is that we really need to support more industries than just pure technology. We need to support life sciences, gaming. There were just all these different industries that really didn't have that gathering of resources and knowledge brought together for them. And so I decided to do something kind of fun with Clayton Christopher. He had just sold Sweet Leaf Tea to Nestle for a couple of $100 million, and he was a good friend of mine. And I said, why don't we start an incubator for consumer products? And now we're 3 years old now, and we're getting ready to launch both nationally and globally to some degree, and very exciting. And to look at how we can truly use both the law, because there are law firms. There's an ABA journal out now about how law firms are incubating companies within the context of their law firm, which is happening and happening a lot in London. And then also how we can create other entities, and not just attorneys, but incubators that will create entities to really truly educate and inform entrepreneurs. So that's kind of what I do.
And what's unique about Sherry's incubator effort, incubation station, that's the name.
Yeah,
right
today.
Today. Oh, don't tease it. No, let's not go there. But what she's doing is really interesting, because I mean, we're all like tech. We do a lot of tech in this town, and everywhere, because tech is permeating everything anyway. It's the Internet of Things, right? But she's, one of the areas of focus that she's doing is in consumer packaged goods, which is like really an important area. And that is, Austin has actually had a presence in food and beverage products, packaged goods and beverages, and Sweet Leaf Tea is one of those examples, and Guiltless Gourmet, and many other success stories that have come out of Austin over the years. So it's not all just about tech. It's still about things we eat, things we consume, and things we do. As a retailer, I know that there's we also got clothes on, right? So somebody's got to make these things. So their technology alone doesn't do it. So really very unique niche that Incubation Station is filling in town. So good. We have a lot of people standing here, unless you really want to stand, like me, because I'm just hyper. We have seats. There's a seat there, here, scattered all around. Please welcome, come in. And again, this is kind of an informal gathering, so at any point in time, don't feel like you're chained to your seat. If you want to just stand up and stretch, go stand in the back, get a drink, go to the restroom, please feel free to do that, okay? All right, so with that as a prelude, we'll kind of kick it off into the discussion here. So let's talk a little bit about London. I mean, I've touched upon this tech city kind of place, and so I want to kind of kick it off, but I have to read my... Everybody else did such a good job with their introductions. I may not get into all the nuts and bolts of that, but I have to read Worley's introduction, because it's just, this guy is just, you're going to love this. This is
Did Josh Bear write this?
I have no idea who the source was,
but then I came to you. He was like, by the way, I made a special slide deck of 20 slides.
I was at that Ignite Austin
presentation, but you have to wait till you have to do it.
Yes.
So I was like, I feel like I don't want, every time I come to Capital Factory,
it's a surprise du jour, or this is
Jack in the Box presentation.
Yeah, it's
right?
making me uncomfortable.
So this is the entertainment portion of the evening here, because it's just he deserves and warrants this. So it seems like every day you hear about some new and crazy innovation. Well, William Hurley, or Worley, as he is known worldwide, has been making those innovations for over 20 years. A holder of 14, get this now, there's some facts in here too. He's a holder of 14 patents.
Not many patents.
Okay. A certified master inventor by IBM. A master inventor, I didn't know they had such a job.
As is Sebastian.
Okay, we have two master inventors
We
in the room
eliminated
here.
that one earlier.
Yeah.
Distance, though.
Yeah. If we come too close to each other.
Innovation will occur right there. And with a history in research and development with Apple, Worley is a leader in pushing software and hardware to the limit. So he's also been named, I love this, an international genius by the city of Amsterdam.
That part.
I love the Dutch, man. What are we going to call this guy?
That part's actually true and cool.
And it's also a reason why you want to visit Amsterdam, because it's just such a fun, cool city. But I think you probably want to set up shop in London, because they actually get real stuff done there.
Well, yeah, they also gave me a key to the city, so I don't want to joke.
Okay,
I'm just
okay,
saying,
okay.
You might have to question somebody that does that.
And so Worley is continually pushing the envelope of advanced. No, there's more. Worley is continually pushing the envelope of advanced technology. And then there's my favorite line in Worley's LinkedIn profile. Okay, he ends his LinkedIn profile introduction with, quote, "I also have a mind-controlled skateboard and a taser drone," which is absolutely badass.
I guess that's kind of badass.
No, it says obviously badass. So
Yeah, obviously, that's what.
so now you have some frame of reference for who Worley is, and
Or none at all.
or none at all. And so he's going to give you a Worley-esque introduction to London off of that, and what he experiences when he goes there, and why he goes there, and what's happening in the tech and creative scenes there, my
I've only
friend.
been arrested there twice.
Okay.
I've been going to London for a while. So I get invited to a lot of international cities to speak, and they do these things like the International Genius Grant, which is awesome, and I love it. But basically, they're like, that guy would be expensive to speak at our universities. You should give him a title and a plane ticket, right? And so, I mean, and that's kind of that's the reality of it. And so I go to different cities, and I do this thing. And every city wants, us to move our business there, right? And they want every business to move there. And they start by having you sit down with lawyers, and they tell you about all the tax things, they tell you all these things that, and I'm like,
Oh, we're gonna get to that part of the show too.
yeah, I'm sure I'm the wrong partner. Like, I could literally not give a shit less about that. So,
That's my part. Just keep going.
yeah. So, but that'll be covered by the lawyers. But in all of those travels, and because of the actual British Airways innovation flight that did, British Airways did an innovation flight where they took 100 of the world's greatest innovators, or as I like to call it, 98 of the world's greatest innovators, creating the market. And they put us on a plane, and we did a kind of a hackathon to help out various organizations and causes with the United Nations. So we flew from San Francisco to London, and when we landed, we went to the G8 Summit, and we presented our findings, and we were like, you've been working on these problems for years. We were on a plane for 11 hours. And that's was really, I'd been to London a lot, but it's always for business. So it's in, it was the first time I got to sit with people and in the community, and some people from Hackney I met up with, and things like that. And it was the right scene for me. So it was more developed than some of the tech scenes in a lot of the other cities. It had more of the developed political infrastructure that was open to the ideas and the stuff. And it was a great hub, right? There's plenty of direct flights, all the people I'm working with going here and there. So like the infrastructure was there as well. And I started finding talent really fast. And so I actually, between that and the inaugural flight from London to Austin for British Airways, hired 3 people from London and brought them over here. So that was like already there was a benefit. There were like people I wanted, things I wanted to do. And it makes a lot of sense as a small business to be there as a business center. I see it a lot as in New York, right? And if I'm a small business and I want to expand, I don't need an office in New York because it's expensive and it's, I sit in traffic for hours and all that. If I'm going to do that, I'd rather be going taking over Europe, right? I'd rather send you and have something to do it. But I liked, kind of what gelled was the community. So I was able to go to more events in the short time I was there that were like this. There were more people with your attitude. There was a lot more collaborative environment. For my business, that's a very big boost. That's what it's driven off of. And so I really like that. I like there was a high level of education. Most of the people I met were very well versed in art. And most of them, you mentioned about Hackney, and I like this. Everybody in our company also is a musician or makes movies or does this or that. And there was that too. And so that kind of relation between Austin and London really, really worked for me. And so, we've been, we'll flirt around with putting an office there forever, and who knows if we will, because, we didn't make all of this money spending it. I mean, so but it is the only city that has ever garnered the interest of my partners as far as somewhere we actually spend any time looking into and that we've hired people from and things like that. And that says a lot.
Cool. Well, and as I say, it's one of those places where everybody speaks English and drinks beer. It's like the makings of a perfect friendship right there. Between Austin and there, I mean, it's like, we've already started, and it's that kind of relationship and friendliness is just right out of the gate, a given. So, what's that?
People take their dogs to work.
And people take their dogs to work. There we go. And to the pubs and everywhere else. Great. Well, that's a starting introduction here. We're going to talk a lot more about what happens in London, but in the meantime, Lou, why don't you tell us how Retail Me Not got started? We know how you got started here and how you blew up and kind of grew pretty quickly, but so at what point did you make the decision to kind of go conquer Europe, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I guess back when we were sort of getting started, we were working on Retail Me Not here, but that was actually born out of that position as well. It was Retail Me Not started as a website run by 5 guys in Melbourne, Australia. and who had no sort of didn't have a strong business background, didn't have a strong retail background, and so our thesis behind all of it was just sort of professionalizing what was kind of a two guys in a closet type business. And so we did that, worked out pretty well. And so about 9 months after that, we decided that we figured there must be two guys in the closet somewhere in the UK, and we can surely go find them and kind of do the same thing. What we found was actually very different. We actually found a business, Voucher Codes, which is now part of Retail Not, back in 2011, and they were actually absolutely not two guys in the closet. We're actually much more similar to what we were, and had executed a very similar thesis. And so for us, sort of going in there and meeting with the founders, a guy named Duncan Jennings, and his team, they were very much like us. They thought about the business the same way, they talked about it the same way, and so it was a sort of beautiful fit from the beginning. And so, I mean, at a more sort of higher business level, the other thing we thought about were just the markets we wanted to be in, where we thought made sense. Obviously, we're an internet business, so e-commerce was making sure we found e-commerce markets was the first thing, so that's pretty easy to figure out. You go look at score study or something else, and you can figure out where you need to go. But then the next question is whether or not what you do resonates with the consumers in that particular market. So, the UK has a very similar sort of discounting culture in retail, the way that we do in the US. They think about it a little bit differently, but it's very similar, and so that made sense. And of course, with the presence of somebody in the market, for enough people in time in the market was a good sign as well. So it was very, very smooth sort of cultural fit. There's some interesting challenges along the way that we didn't appreciate. Here I think in startup culture in the U.S. it's very equity centric. So everyone who goes to work for a startup wants stock options or something else. In the UK, that's not so much the case. So it's a little bit different. The founding team there had not sort of treated their employees that way, and so when we landed and actually acquired the company, the first thing we did was give everyone equity, and everyone was shocked and thrilled and thought it was the greatest thing ever, and really was something that really helped sort of bond the UK employee base, their now American brothers. And that worked out really well. But there's a lot of nuances to granting equity in the UK, and it's, to be honest, not as lucrative as it is for people in the US. And so just because of the tax system and everything else, and I can bore you to death with the nuance and details.
45%.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it's anyway. But it really worked out well, and so it was exciting, and I think it's been a big hit for us. I'm trying to think of the other fun nuances that.
How big was Voucher Codes when you started, and kind of what's happened?
Yeah, so they were about 38 employees.
38.
That's not very about. That's pretty exact. So yeah, 38 employees, and we've got just over almost 90 now in London.
And how long? What period of time?
2.5 years.
Okay.
So it's going pretty fast. This is going really well. And so it's been, and we've had, to Worley's point, it's a great experience with the talent levels there as well. A little bit, especially on the engineering side, recruiting can be tough, competitive, and London's not cheap. But overall, I think it's worked out really well.
Yeah, now other companies that have blown up the same way, HomeAway is over there. Last time I looked, they had 50, 60 people. I was over there in June, went to their offices near Victoria Station. 200 people at HomeAway there now. It's like, whoa. And Spreadfast is over there with Mass Relevance, and now they've merged companies, and so they started out being two separate companies, but they put them together, and they're already up to 15 people just in since the beginning of the year, and scaling like crazy. So so we've got some Austin traction going on, and so one of the other interesting things that happens with that I'm trying to do every time I go over is to connect some of the Austin companies there, because part of it is building culture, and so having some Austin culture over there. We are popular all over the world, and so people in Austin just gravitate to people from Austin anyway, because it's a cool scene. They're here for South by, or this week they're all here for ACL Fest or whatever, and so connecting some of the Austin companies over there has been a lot of fun too, to get some of that conversation going and starting to hold some events that, we're doing an Austin Love-In November over there as part of Internet Week Europe, and, inviting a whole bunch of people to come over and join us. It's just like ways to just celebrate something different. So
if we ever tell people go to Spreadfast or HomeAway, I'm coming to see you.
Okay, yeah. Done. Cool. Well, thanks for that initial discussion on your experience, Lou. Over to you, Linda. So you've had a real interesting experience. So during what period of time was the scaling going on, and how did that kind of start and grow and work? Both, in your case, it's not just in the UK, but I mean, you guys took over Europe, literally. So
Yeah.
what was involved in all that?
Well, Starbucks has a really interesting acquisition or scaling strategy. It's either through acquisition or through partnering with people who are already there, who have operations set up. And one thing about Starbucks is that was kind of the last sort of mecca, right? You don't want to go to Europe or go to the UK with coffee, and if you mess it up there, then it's going to be bad. So they first went to Asia. So that was the first sort of
Test market.
test market. It was also like, would it work? I mean, a lot of the idea and the audacity there was that they were going to get people to walk around Asia with paper cups, and that would never happen. Well, now it's happening, right? So tested it there. Really, could we expand the brand really globally? Then went to the UK, and it really was similar. It was an acquisition strategy. A really smart, shrewd couple from Bellevue, Washington, which is just outside of Seattle, started a company called Seattle Coffee Company, and they established the real estate footprint and basically mimicked the Starbucks brand. So they positioned themselves very smartly for sale, and so Starbucks went in with an acquisition. And so the first couple of years, the first year I was there, they basically sent over a team, if you will, to inoculate the existing company with the Starbucks culture. And so we had sort of these rock stars from operations, if you will, and I was over there in product at the time. Now I'm on the people side. And it was really about how do we continue to establish the real estate footprint? How do we have operational excellence from the beginning? How do we source product at a time when Starbucks thought they were going to be the next Pottery Barn? Because at that time, it was in '98 when Martha Stewart was going crazy and Pottery Barn was crazy, and Starbucks thought they should sell egg cups and books, if any of you remember that. So we actually had to scrap everything that Starbucks in the US was doing and source our own stuff, which was super fun. And then it was about getting the culture of Starbucks and hiring and scaling that way. And it is much more complex when you are hiring. Certainly at an hourly level it's different, but everybody has working contracts there that takes months to get out of. And so it took us a good year to build the infrastructure, and really did it by having that star team, if you will, go over and build it, and then start to really bring in the local talent and basically hand it off. They still have, to this day, they have a lot of Americans that come in and out and support that group over there, but the idea was to really have local talent really drive and scale the business. For good reason, right? We want them to own the culture. But also, there's just a lot of stuff about doing business in London or in the UK where you think it's just common sense here about things we take for granted, recycling, employment, how easy it is, and you've got all these boroughs and councils that you need to negotiate things with, and so to have that local knowledge, we really built that up quickly.
Yeah, just because they speak English, it's not American.
Well, and I do want to comment on that. It's not. It is English. We speak American. There are a lot of things that you learn very quickly about what not to talk about, like your pants and your puppies and all sorts of mistakes that you might make that I haven't made. We had a mug award at Starbucks, which makes perfect sense. And it was like, you've done a really good job, you get a mug award. And somebody gave a mug award to somebody in the first meeting, which is basically, calling somebody an idiot. And so, you learn those things, but beyond the language, there's also just the history there. I mean, we're really babies, in comparison to the UK and the history there. And, people are still talking about the war. That's still very real. And there's just years and years and years of just legacy behaviors that, like you were talking about with the equity, that's not surprising to hear. And so there's a lot of going in and really trying to understand and not just say, okay, you speak English, so we're the same. And just really honoring that history there is important.
Yeah, being respectful.
Well, yeah, like with any culture,
Yeah.
right? But I think there's sometimes an automatic assumption because it is English,
Yes.
but it's
Yes. Great. And Linda's got a whole lot of other experience too that we're going to get into in a second here through some, we want to involve you in the conversation as well through questions you have and so forth. So that's not her only claim to fame is that, helping Starbucks take over Europe. Some people may go, why did you do that?
Well, I know that mixed emotions. Like, I go to Paris, I'm like, oh, there's Starbucks. I mean,
We had coffee there before, and it was pretty damn good.
I don't know if I want to see it. Yeah, I mean, trust me, right? But I have a client now who is so excited to meet me because he loves Jesse James Body Shop, and I've yet to go over and get him. But he's like, wow, Austin, So that's what we're also known for as well.
We got all kinds of culture here that makes its way around the world.
Yep.
Television and the internet thing.
That's right.
So Sherry, if you can, we're going to get back to just kind of entrepreneurialism, getting started in Europe, how that all works, but can you give us a little bit of an idea from your travels over there, which are frequent on many different levels, but, the incubation, acceleration, kind of startup scene, how is that coming along in London, and what would you tell people, because it's no longer a situation where you just have to go over there by yourself and show up. There is some infrastructure now that has evolved that you can plug into. So kind of what's your take?
Yeah, and I would like to talk about it. What I will tell you is that I'm approaching it from a bit of a novice. Yes, I have been, and I'm traveling there. But part of what I'm doing here today is that I'm really in cahoots and alliance, very much improving the relationship and what is happening between Austin and London, with James Uri and with London partners, and really looking at how it is that I can become educated. I know enough to be dangerous in the sense that one of the things that really excites me about going to London is a bit based on kind of that novice we have in consumer products, that we're just so trendy and we're so there, we're so healthy, and we're so politically correct, and we have these ideas about who we are as a nation and who we are with products. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting, being in London and spending time there, is that I kind of looked around and I thought, gosh, we really kind of need to speed up a bit. The level of consciousness about kind of doing good and doing well, which is something that our incubator spends a lot of time on. How can we have for-profit businesses that also contribute to communities and are socially conscious? I think that's something that's very much a trend, but I really kind of felt that there was a lot that was already going on in London with that and going on with products. I picked up a bottled water, and there was this great, I'm not going to remember exactly, but it basically said, someday water will be like us. All water will be like us. And, I forget the name of it, but it said, we're sourced locally, we have no profits, we save the world, we're, wonderful, and everybody else isn't, but anyway, but I just thought, it was interesting though, because they were, I was drinking this water, I was thinking, well, they did enough to get into my hands, and as a tourist at that point, so, but I think that there's some really interesting things culturally and I am focused on obviously technology. There's a lot of crossover. There are consumer goods that are sold on the internet every day, all the time. But, as far as focusing on the physical goods, I just found that really fascinating. So there was that. But really what I see is that, and I'm going to be honest, that I wouldn't even pretend to say that I've mastered everything that it takes in terms of what it's going to, how we're going to do incubation well here and, internationally. One of the things that I really, there's a couple things. As a law firm that's also innovative and really looking at how we can actually get people informed for success, I think it's fascinating that James's firm and that our firm have been so focused on how we can actually incubate and provide the law as just one of the resources that people need, and the access to capital is a big part of that. So I think that that's going to be very, very important. But really providing community and mentorship around for diversified economies. One of the things that is going to happen worldwide is we cannot have economies just a rise and fall just on technology, or we were always hit the booms and busts that happened with paradigm shifts. And we have a chamber right now that's trying to figure out how to foster economies that are not just based on, just technology. We really need to think about that. So when I think about that, both, in Austin and what we're doing, and it's just very important. And with the life sciences, and we're finally getting our medical center, this is a very big part, and I know that James's firm has done a good deal of incubation and support with companies, resources and other things with life science companies, and that's very important. So I just think that whole conversation is just so important, and I'm a novice when it comes to exactly how to do this. What I can tell you is that one of the things that we're really focused on with respect to what we're doing in our incubator, and yes, it's incubation station, and everybody thinks it's innovation station, which is great. It's one of the reasons that someday we may be named something else. But but I think what's really interesting is that we're really focused on creating an MBA for your business where we pay you. The idea that we can create a different way to have an educational opportunity that is not a community college, and where we really teach people how to, on a very high level, be successful in their businesses and what they do. And we have been approached internationally. I've been approached from really all over the world to be providing what that is, because one of the things about working with consumer products is that we work with market validated ideas. So these products are already created. They're not, and not that digital technology incubators always have just ideas, but a lot of times they're still building it and developing it. Here we have something that you can eat and put your hands on or see, and you can see the benefit of. So we're really working on, how do we take companies and teach them to be businesses, teach entrepreneurs to be businesses, innovators who really, don't need necessarily a master's degree to create something that could be innovative, but that have no idea how to have a business.
And that tactile thing is a really important area that I think is going to become an interesting area of growth for Austin, too. Stuff that really is advanced and happening already over in the London tech community and throughout Europe, but I really see it very strong in London, is 3D printing. The stuff that's going on with 3D printing already is just like way off the charts. They are just really rocking it. And stuff in wearable technologies. We're now talking where fashion and design and technology all merge. Really cool, and it's not just Google Glass, okay? There's a lot of really cool stuff happening on those kind of forefronts. And because if you think about Europe as a whole, which most of us, many of us, not all of us, came from, has a history of being, making things, crafting society, of building things with hands. And so that has never left. They've just kind of added technology to the craftsmanship sense of accomplishment.
Right.
So I think there's really some leadership that's happening from there that I'm hoping with each posse of people we bring over, for South by Southwest and for other things here, they're bringing more of that into the Austin community, because I was at an event the other day for the fashion industry in Austin that is trying to now aggregate and create a real sense of they're there in fashion and design for Austin. I thought it was going to be like, 5 people showing up and maybe having a conversation about fashion. This was a packed house at the Entrepreneur Center, which I never knew there was an Entrepreneur Center in Austin. Well, it's way down there next to Toys R Us, of all places. And the city has an Entrepreneur Center, and there were like 50 people in the room that were just like deep into fashion, and not just about the design, but they make it.
The manufacturing.
About sewing and pattern and all that stuff. And they are really serious about spinning up a serious fashion industry in Austin, but not the way it is in New York or Milan or other places, but with an Austin sensibility to it. And really, to your point, Sherry, about the double bottom line of the social entrepreneurship kind of stuff, also working in elements that we can kind of pull in the community that often in these worlds of technology-driven society creates the digital divide, but people that are just not participating. Not everybody is ready to use a computer and be actively involved in it every day. And so what do we do with a whole lot of, young people to old people who have lots of talent, lots of skills, lots of capability? How do we include them in the conversation? You do that stuff too, Worley, with all your inventions, right?
Well, more than that, part of why I spend so much time in London is I work with the United Nations and a couple other organizations on trying to bridge that gap. Doing all that stuff. And so a good friend of mine, Dr. Sue Black, is in London. She has an organization called Tech Moms, which addresses exactly what you said. And so what Sue has done is she has taken some of the concepts we did in that organization called Mobilizer, which was to get more women involved in science and technology, engineering, and math, and to kind of create an equilibrium there because it's very skewed. She's taken some of that and she said, well, that's great, but in London, there's all these moms who can't support their kid when they come home from school because they don't know how to use an iPad, they don't know how to use a computer. They are also potential workers, right? And so when we were working on Mobilizer with the UN at the last general session, we went over the economics, and you would drive billions and billions and billions of dollars of GDP if these people were engaged, they could use the technology. And especially just if women were, it was an incredible influx of economic stability and increases in GDP and things like that. And so she said, well, I want to do that on a small scale in London. And so Tech Moms provides these free classes, and they basically put these moms through a certification process, and they go and they learn whatever they may need. Maybe they need it for a job, and they need to learn Microsoft Office. Maybe they need to support their kid when they get home from school. And she's done incredibly well. I think this year she's won like 4,000 awards or whatever. But it's taking off. But that's
so many as you.
But that's one of the reasons that I spend a lot of time in London, is because there's a lot of my collaborators in that specific effort, which is closing the divide, getting more people educated, getting more women involved, and getting them the credit for the work that they do. Most of my collaborators are in London and Geneva and here, and so all the people doing the work are in London because of that culture. And Sue's amazing, and Sue's exactly like you described, right? She's Dr. Sue Black, and she's this wonderful short little lady with super bright pink hair that actually that's actually cut exactly like mine. So the first time we met, we were like, awkward. Clearly, aside from her amazing sense of fashion, that's a program you can go look up. That's an exact example of what you're talking about, of trying to close the gap and actually doing it down in the trenches. So she doesn't have a class, she doesn't have a forum, she does it wherever she can. The university did here or there, and she's got a new book coming out about her experiences, and it's really telling about how big a problem that is, and how I think part of the Austin-London relationship is sending talent both ways. It's funny, often we won't help the people in our backyard, right? You'll all give $1 to save a starving child, and but you'll be in Austin and you'll call it East Austin. It's like, it's not, you don't call it fucking West Austin, right? It's Austin. And but people over there don't know that, and they'll come over here, and we've been bringing people over here to help, on the east side of the city. And then likewise, I've been going over there and doing things in areas where in London it's the same thing. They there's like this area, and there's like this borough and that borough, and some of these places there is a big gap, and they don't bridge it locally, but through this relationship, it's kind of ironic that it's been bridged by people that are like, ooh, I'd love to go to Austin and help that problem. Right. And also people are like, I'd love to go to London and help that problem. You could save a whole lot of money if you just went like 4 miles the other side.
That's too practical.
Not funny. Yeah. And when I'm the practical one, there's a huge problem. But that's a great, there's dozens of programs. The Mobilizer organization has been doing really well in its London efforts. The stuff we're doing with the UN has been doing really well in its London efforts. But Tech Moms is kind of like my star example, because Sue has done such an amazing job with a group of individuals that are clearly, kind of disenfranchised from all of the tech.
And to put a plug in on the back of that, as I came back from my digital trade mission, I right away said, okay, this has got to be way more than just technology and a digital conversation between Austin and London, because of who our communities are. So I right away started broadening the relationship to the creative industry. So I started connecting musicians together and the film industry together. I'm working on visual artists. We're working on trying to do an Austin mural in Hackney and a Hackney mural in Austin. So people go, why the hell do you have an Austin mural in London? What the hell is that all about? So, well, here's a QR code, and you check that out, and it explains what we're doing between our communities to connect them together. And so one of the first entities of a substantial size that we were able to get real traction with is the community colleges, okay? Austin Community College and Hackney Community College. Immediately, I was able to join together, make a couple of introductions. They signed an MOU, and boom, we jumped into programs. So I've got those 2 community colleges, and Lou's company, Retail Me Not, along with British Airways and Adobe Systems, were our first trial companies. This last year in December, we created the Millennial Mentors Program, which is marrying students from ACC and from HCC together, and they met virtually online, and they worked for 3 months together solving marketing briefs and marketing problems for these major companies. And so they worked through Skype and through Google Hangouts and created complete marketing briefs, and then thanks to British Airways being one of the partners, we flew the Hackney students over here. They got to meet all of them for the first time in person together, and we had a venue here called Hackney House Austin for the second year. Hackney brought 100 people, 40 tech companies, incredible technologies and stuff. We did workshops and drank a lot of beer and did all sorts of things during South by. We also put these kids on stage and they pitched to not only their clients, but also a whole VIP section. We had, the VP of marketing from Whole Foods and, all kinds of really great people to sort of seed this program as it evolves to the next level. So we had all kinds, and now we're moving, the two colleges are moving into craft beer apprenticeships. So we're exchanging master brewers between here and London, and they're expanding it to culinary arts. UT's got a big culinary arts department, and so does ACC. So, I mean, there's just all kinds of really fun, cool stuff. And I can only tell you from doing this now for 3 years, where it started out, like I said, I was just visiting. I got a free ticket and I went. And now it's like 40 hours a week of my life as a volunteer activity, so it's insane. But it's got all this great traction, and the conversation has enlarged to such a degree that, and there are so many people involved that the opportunity is just really limitless for everybody to get involved. And it really is about community and connecting the two communities in a very, deep kind of way. I haven't met anybody during this whole time when I've been in London that says, you know anything about Austin? Would you like to come to Austin and, to study, to work, to do anything? It's like, yes, totally. I mean, Austin, I'm there. And the same thing here. I haven't met anybody here who I say, hey, we got a sister city relationship with London. You want to kind of get in on that? And they're all going, yeah, like totally. There's a lot of places people don't want to go. London is not one of them. They want to go there. Despite the weather and despite everything else, I mean, it's still just a rocket place. So anyway, so that's the plugs of the day. So just a couple of real quick thoughts, if maybe you share, and then we'll kind of open it up for some questions and kind of see what everybody's thinking is here before we turn it over to Richard and James to say a couple of things about how they work to help companies get set up over there. So there's actually some, not just our anecdotal kind of information, there's actually some practical things that will come out of this for you tonight too. But just in terms of getting started, there's always that age-old question, and I've had to do this now several times too, and I don't know that I have the absolute answer, but what do you recommend in terms of you're a company that is going to go set up an operation in another place? So let's just say London, that's the conversation tonight. Do you send somebody over from here, Do you send one of your people, whoever either volunteers to go or you think you're going to force over there to go and kind of figure it out and start to set it up? Or do you, go over there and do an intensive recruiting thing and try to find a local, managing director, a first person on the ground natively, and kind of build around that person? What are thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I think honestly, the answer is it depends. So you're welcome. There you go.
So I don't have an answer either.
Yeah. So we've done both. We organically started a site in Germany, and went in the market, surveyed it, talked to a lot of folks, and hired someone in Germany to sort of launch our operations there. We ended up having him spend a whole hell of a lot of time in Austin and in our London office, sort of familiarize himself with the business more. Because one of the things that we struggled with at least was finding a business that was truly comparable to ours in some of these markets. And in London, as I said before, we happened to find a great team there. We found that in France, Germany, we did. And so we had to really, and it wasn't for talking. We talked to a lot of people, and there were some, two guys in the closet doing something, but we didn't.
You didn't want to know.
Their approach wasn't what we were into. So what chance music for us, and so anyway, so that was sort of our approach was doing it that way. That obviously presents some challenges culturally and sort of working through things. And then we've done the opposite, which is sending someone overseas and going about it that way. Presents a different set of challenges, particularly for that person as they go over and sort of try to learn the local culture. And for us, being a kind of consumer-facing sort of and retail business, understanding the local sort of culture and interests and how people would interact with our product and how it would develop over time. And so anyway, sort of both have their challenges, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it depends too. I mean, when I think about Asia, it was, you know, the complexity of going in over there and really having people who knew how to run quick service or retail there and knows all of the legal components and the ins and outs. That was really an important sort of entry. And they all had different sort of buyout. Some of them never, some of them going for ultimately a full acquisition. So it was set up that way from the beginning. And then I would say, you know, it's interesting going to the UK. We had a group there that already knew how to operate, so that was a big thing. Who knows how to operate locally? But knowing that the culture was so critical, they did send over, you know, executives and leadership to really ensure that the culture was there and really drive that culture and that operation.
Culture of the company, you're talking about, the products and so forth.
Yeah, and the product. So that was really critical. Germany decided to go with somebody who was established and, you know, a partner there, and didn't have that. Ended up having to terminate that relationship, and it was really difficult. And they transitioned them back to, okay, how do we bring the culture back in? So it all depends on where the market is, the market maturity, what type of the complexity.
And probably what kind of company you have and product you have, and you know, how hard it is to bring it into a market.
For sure, yeah.
So, Sherry, anything?
Well, for me, it was just an alignment of interests. I mean, I like to, you know, I can't help it. I'm overeducated, so I like to find experts who know what they're doing. You know, and I think that there are times that, you know, it's just, I mean, part of what we do when we look at, you know, when we're going to be looking at the regions that are interested in us or where they want us to come. I mean, we're going to be looking at the culture, and we'll be looking for the fit of, you know, what we're going to be doing, and is there a soft landing in a sense. But I really like the idea of finding, you know, professionals who really truly have alignment. In this particular case, with UK, I mean, we have alignment both in they have interest in developing things here in Austin, and I have interest in developing things there. So that worked out very, very well, but without any really, you know, kind of attachment about what has to happen in either event. I think when you can we kind of can teach each other and help each other. And I happen to be someone who's very involved in the entrepreneurial community, as you know, in Austin. So you know, I have some things to offer there. And, you know, as we're getting to know each other, we can share the information on the different cultures. And I think that is very, very helpful. You know, and just not having to do things over, you know, I think the main thing that I would say is that, you know, we have this tendency, and I'm actually, this is the entrepreneur hat of mine, is that, you know, I really do like to kind of do things first and kind of think about them later a little bit. So that, but I think that what happens is that I think actually just reaching out, because in Austin, I mean, I know here you could go speak to almost anybody you needed, and you could ask, how do you do this well? And you can get a lot of good answers. And not that you'll get the exact answer that will work for your company, but I know that people will share with you, you know, how they did it, what worked, what didn't. And then you really are going to have to apply it to your company. How does it work for you? You know, you're going to have to think about that and how that's going to work for you. But you know, that's what we're here for tonight, is that you don't have to do that alone and make it up. And I also think, I mean, something like a soft landing into the culture and the work that you've done, Fred, is, you know, that's something to do too. I mean, you're already there, you're trying to create these relationships, and, you know, I would probably, you know, you're a person that, you find a connector to connect you with the right people. I mean, that's what I do. I connect with people who are aligned with me, that know what they're talking about, who, you know, who are interested and passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, and that's, you know, those are the people that I want to do business with, and that's how I'm going to be making my decisions.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's a perfect jumping off point, because I want to introduce two more people into the discussion, and just so you know who they are, because they're our hosts for the evening and put this whole thing together, and so that you can understand kind of what value they bring to the conversation, and then we can answer some of your questions. We can take a 5-minute break, and everybody can go grab something more to drink or whatever, and we can have a further dialogue to see what's on your mind. But Richard Snarl, if you would stand up, please, and James, where are you? You're all the way in the back. Come back. Come up here. I know I've misplaced you around here somewhere. So James just flew in this morning, didn't he? He's still walking.
So thank you.
Richard Stenaro
Yep.
is with London and Partners here in San Francisco, and James Ore is with Ore Clark Solicitors and Accountancy in London. And I'll let them tell you a little bit about what both of them do. But thank you very much for putting all this together and having us together this evening. But
That was
tell them how you
actually
make it easy.
very good segue. We're connectors, so that's what we do. And maybe I'll go first because I can set the stage for you. So I'm in San Francisco. My London story is very brief. My wife and I hatched a plan to go and take great trips there. So I ended up as an international banker over in London for many years and cut the cord and came back and found that the mayor of London wanted to open an operation in the US. So that was pretty exciting. We have 2 offices. Important to say, I'm in San Francisco. We have an office in New York and we cover Canada and the US. So who are we? What do we do? So we're literally the mayor's office around the world. We have offices in China and India and other parts of the world too that are important for business. We've been actually around for about 20 years. We've helped over 3,000 companies from all over the world. In Austin here, one of the big wins was Whole Foods. We helped set up their flagship store in Kensington, which is absolutely the most beautiful Whole Foods I've ever seen in my life. And we're funded by the mayor, about 80% of the funding, but then we also have funding from partners like James' firm, Ore Clark, that pay a membership fee, and for that we establish a relationship that's here obviously dynamic in market, but we're able to plug them into expert advisors like James to answer all the questions that they have about many, many different things. Practical things, yes, but also great business questions. How does it work? Who should I talk to? So that pile of funding provides a broad range of services, starting at the front end with a lot of you maybe thinking about this. Am I going to do it? How do I do it? What is the London market like? We can show you the size and shape of the market. So it's very transactional. We modify, mold what we do and what we have to offer to what your business is all about. So we'll show you the landscape, how does it operate, what are the channels in, who are the competitors, if it's regulated, we can get you information about that. We can set up phone calls with people in the market in your space or with our partners or the people that are involved around what you're doing. So that at a certain point it takes you to the phase where you have a pretty good idea that there could be a great opportunity there, right? So you're talking to your board, produce these reports that can compare London to Amsterdam, Paris, Singapore, any place in the world around the drivers that are important for your business. So at that point you say, okay, well, that seems possible. Let's do the due diligence and the discovery. Then it's all about plugging you into the practical matters. What about hiring people? What about everybody being on a contract? Can I fire them? If it doesn't work out, where should I be in London? What kind of offices, are available? Everything. So how does it all work? How do you manage it? We have some tools of the trade. So for some of you that want to dip your toe in the water, we have a free workspace in London for a year that's set up for that purpose, low capital cost way of coming in. There's an entrepreneur's visa, which James knows a lot more about than I do, but it's set up for that purpose, for one person to come over. It's good for 3 years, I think now, and it's renewable. So there are a lot of things that we know about, but it's really all about getting you comfortable with the idea of establishing an operation in London not being as difficult as you may think it would be. Then as you're coming in, we're like a well-connected uncle that's helping you win. We have a massive network that cuts across technology, but also life sciences, financial services, the creative industry, everything that converges around all of that. Central government, local government, city government, certainly, but we're really trying to streamline everything for you so that it's fast and easy, and the point is you get down to business quickly and start making money. And then we plug you into that network. We try to understand your strategies so that we know who we can introduce you to. Sometimes it can be a direct introduction for the revenue opportunity, but it's more about networking. So we put on fabulous opportunities in London, fabulous events, 200 companies at Kensington Palace, or 100 Indian companies at the Lord's Cricket Ground. And we have contacts throughout the verticals, but also through the national communities. One thing that's really important to understand from the Austin community is that in London, you have massive communities from every European nation, from Southeast Asia, from the Middle East, from Russia. And the thing about London that's different from, say, San Francisco, where I live, is they all live together. They live and work together in these neighborhoods. And so you're actually, in working together, you're actually really getting the benefit of that international flavor. And a lot of our clients, which include Facebook and LinkedIn and Microsoft and Yelp and all the names Yammer, Twitter, really they're going there. And one of the things they like is that they can localize their business and prepare it for conquering the rest of the world. So you have all of the talent there that's in sales and marketing and the economics, if that's relevant, everything that you need, engineering, a lot of talent there as we've talked about, and that's a key feature of London, so that they prepare and they launch out to the rest of Europe or to Asia. So they're all right there. They all want to live and work in London, and we can connect you into those communities. How do we make money? We don't. We're nonprofit, so we're funded in the way that I described to provide this service. The reason that it works, and they've done it for 20 years, is that there's a return on investment. So it's about creating jobs in London. Our payback literally is in the jobs. So all the services I've described are at absolutely no cost at all. There's no hidden catch or anything. At the end, we come to you with a form to ask you how we did and confirm your plans. So we're measured by how successful you are in London. The services are there to help create jobs, and it's all about understanding your strategy from a transactional business point of view and sharing with you very quickly what the opportunities are. We're thrilled to death to do it. If it's in an early stage, great. We can add the most value. So if you're a young company, you're thinking a year from now, let me think about Europe, great time to meet us, and our partners too. I wanted to also introduce Haley.
I was going to do that too.
Who is our kissing cousin from the UK consulate, and maybe say a few words about what you do.
Yes.
So yeah, as Richard said, I work for UK Trade and Investment. Name's Haley Myers. UK Trade and Investment is part of the British government. So we cover all of the UK. We work really closely with Richard, work really closely. You may have met Invest Northern Ireland, the Welsh, Scottish Development International. These are all partners of ours that have specializations in those regions. And I actually just moved to Austin about a month ago. So yay.
She's on the ground here.
Yes, so I am here. I am co-working out of Volca on First South and Monroe. So I would love to be able to talk to you guys about anything. We offer the same sort of services that Richard was talking about, but we're directed into central government. And London is a marvelous place. I absolutely love it. Spend a lot of time there. But for companies that are looking to go to the UK, London can be a little scary. Everybody's really frightened by the price of London. But we can kind of help you find what's going to be the best fit, along with Richard and our other partners. So definitely feel free to reach out and love to meet all of y'all.
That's a good segue too. And one point I want to make is London can be expensive, but it doesn't have to be. There's many affordable places. That's the other benefit we offer. And I always say as a banker, it's the wrong metric. It's like, what's your return on investment? So I remember Facebook was in Soho and they were complaining about the rent. And they said, well, how's a business? Oh, that's great. We're making a ton of money. So I think that's the thing to pay attention to. Let me introduce James Orey, who's one of our longstanding partners, a firm called Orey Clark. Very diversified company, very diversified man, kind of a Renaissance man. So as I say, we turn to him for practical advice and conversations with our key clients. But it's much more than that. It's a brilliant international business advisory. So James, maybe you could say more.
Well, that's very, very generous. And Fred, thank you very much for this. And my friends on the panel, I've been coming to Austin for 4 years. You might wonder why I'm looking like a tomato. Well, it's because we didn't really get the sun in London, and I still, when I see the sun, sort of run towards it without it is an anxiety, I'm pleased to say. Thanks all for coming. I don't have hair to do cool things like my dear friend Worley, but I don't really want to talk about law and finance and those things this evening, because I think people in the audience, if you have an interest in London, I'd like to just touch on a few themes. And I think those two themes are, the platform that exists within London for collaboration and how I see that. Just a couple of points on that. And the other is what I'm sure everybody's interested in is money. So let's start with the first, the collaborative environment within London. I mean, I honestly can remember, I'm in my late 40s now, in my early 20s, trying to travel from Oxfordshire to East London, where I had some friends that I wanted to do some fun stuff with. And it would take me, maybe, with my horse and cart, a year. So I need that skateboard actually, Wayne. But what's really changed within London is the transport infrastructure is really first class now. From bicycles that I see here, your red bikes, we have the blue bikes. From the tube system that you're probably aware of, nobody would ever dare go down there. Well, I'm pleased to tell you there's a lot of people commuting on that tube system. And they're building across London something called Crossrail, which will have an amazing effect. You'll have the ability where they're beginning to build more innovation spaces. For example, Ericsson has a sustainable centre that they've set up in the docks. within a sort of 30-minute landscape. So transport has changed within London. And then what also is changing within London is these platforms where people collaborate. And what I mean by that is Worley would have, and I'm sure Sherry and Linda and Lou, I'm sure, had and been to Tech City. This was an area of the slums of London traditionally, where into it moved Google's campus, venture capital, new startup companies. And what that does, it means within a mile square, things happen much more rapidly and at an interdisciplinary level. And what's just been announced, which I think is very important for those involved in informatics, digital health, perhaps medical devices, is MedCity. And MedCity is taking Oxford, Cambridge, and the Northern London hospitals and creating a sort of physical platform to collaborate. The other thing I'll say is what's never really said, and said often enough, is you can get a lot of things done in London without paying a lot of money at all by being down the good old-fashioned pub. And there's many places where people innovate and collaborate in much lower cost settings than people realize. So I'll give you one specific example. There's an Austin-based company, I won't name them. They are two people. They want to do something very clever in bioinformatics. Someone gets on the field telephone to a friend who's a clinician in the Crick Institute, which is this new institute as part of this MedCity campus. And I don't begin with God Save the Queen, but I feel like I should. But the long story short, that he's very happy for those two individuals to come to his laboratory, to be in his place of work, to work freely and openly on the project that they're working upon. So I want to get over this open culture that exists within London to innovate. Money, 2 points. There's a lot of political rhetoric, and it's really difficult to pierce through it and say, well, what's truth? Well, the truth is there's something called the Technology Strategies Board. And the Technology Strategies Board has put in this year in excess of £350 million of non-dilutive investment into startup companies. And of that, there's about 80 million that went into digital health, about 40 into mobile. So for any of you in the room or acting for clients or whatever your stakeholding position may be, do look at the Technology Strategies Board. It's an evergreen, rolling, non-dilutive program for funding. The other thing I think the British government have got very right is as the venture capital industry fell off a hill, there was a sudden realization there was no capital. So what the British government did was to make it very attractive for people with money to invest in startup companies. And I won't get into numbers, but let's just say that you can raise £150,000 and get a very significant write-off. And what that's done is make a lot of people who wanted to get into the investment community suddenly want to be in the investment community. And that has been a wonderful change and innovation in the UK. So.
Cool. I'm going to acknowledge two more people that are here just so you know who they are. We have two lovely young ladies who you may have met when you walked in. They're not just models. They actually are here on a work assignment. So Amy, the lovely blonde, is with James and is here from Britain. And Adriana is with Richard in San Francisco. So the two of them are just as we go to cocktail mode and all that kind of thing. If you can't get to talk to them, there's two more people with their organizations that you can also engage with. So with that, do we have a few questions of any kind that we haven't touched upon that you might want to ask? And feel free to grab a cocktail while we're doing this. So yes, Monique.
So my question is largely around talent. So I lived there for years before, and it was really evident how the service culture, which really only started to disintegrate during and at the end of the Second World War, was still very, very prevalent. And customer service was certainly not something that was taught or expected or anything else. I'm wondering, especially for Lou and Linda, having to deal even more in that area, do you find that's a challenge Or do you find that there's still issues around that? I mean, it's been a while since I've been back, but do you find that that's still a challenge, or more for training in terms of the customer service component, which I know is very, very different over there?
I mean, I can jump on that. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and particularly for a company like, for instance, when I was with Starbucks, because so much of the Starbucks culture is about that customer service, as opposed to, you know, not that it's just defined differently, say at other quick service where it's about getting correct change and it's fast, but about making connection with people. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I had to do a lot of work around really how you assess for talent and find the right talent, and then training, right, and really reinforcing the culture. And it continues to be a challenge, right? I think one of the cool things is that there is such a global workforce there, right? So when you think about innovation, I think about what we're listening, it's like so exciting because you can go there and have such a global workforce.
I think of Pret a Manger, right?
Yeah,
Brilliant service there.
Yeah, but it's, you know, with that comes challenges too, right? Having a global workforce and just everybody brings their own, all these different cultures to bear. And
I know you, but yeah, like I know you worked at Barclays, for example, which, you know, has some history to it, right? So even within that kind of context, not just the consumer facing customer service, what about it?
Yeah, so I'm working right now with a global insurance company, and we were just talking about his customer experience there, which he was telling me about his customer experience, and I was kind of waiting for it. And, you know, here's the long, you know, the long phone queue that was happening. I was imagining the story was going to go, and he was really actually, I think, pleasantly surprised with the service from this insurance company. And what's interesting, I'm working with them on their strategic direction and where they're going. And for the technology arm of this global insurance company, one of their key strategic imperatives is around customer first, right? So it's that idea of really kind of understanding that is a differentiator in the marketplace, is to have that customer focus. And I think London is making quite a bit of, the companies there, quite a bit of transition around that. We still have the complexity of just the entrenched cultures and just the nature of, you know, global workforce. But I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I really don't, and part of the reason why is because we don't really interact with people. We don't let other people talk to people. We're all digital really, so it's just one of those things. We get occasional customer service emails, we have some live chats we do, but we don't really talk to people. So.
To the hierarchical, I mean, for you, I asked you because you talked about this idea of equity, right? Which is game changing because, again, not that long ago, that would just, you have the people, the upstairs and the downstairs, and never the twain shall meet. So that's more where I was curious about that. No, that idea of, do you think that creates challenges, or do you think that as American companies going there, that creates greater opportunities?
So very much believe it creates greater opportunity. I will say the challenges are sort of surface level, and it's interesting. So when we first did it, everyone was really excited. They didn't really know why, but they were excited. And then, you know, a year and a half later or 2 years later, we went public, and suddenly things became real. They were like, well, what do we do with this stuff now? And they had no idea. So like the amount of education we had to do with our international employee base about exercising and selling stock options and having a broker, and so there's just a lot of employee education you have to do on things that to us are intuitive or we're just, you know, used to. And so that was a challenge for us, and making them understand the value in it. So one of the other things we did is we set up an employee stock purchase plan, which, you know, is sort of this wonderful benefit, which is, you know, kind of free money in some people's minds. And the concept of it and trying to explain it and walk people through it in our EU offices was a real challenge. And so we actually sent our equity plan administrator over for 2.5 weeks, and she spent 2 or 3 days in each one of our offices sitting down one by one with employees, sort of walking them through and explaining why they should do it, and got our adoption rate from 25% to about 60%, which was great. So, anyway.
Other questions, thoughts? Yes, sir.
What is the attitude towards intellectual property? If it's a global market, you know, we really limit the extent of contact that we have with certain Asian countries, just because we're completely IP based, and what, we always considered the EU to be more of a stronghold, more like America when it comes to honoring IP, but with a global presence in the Ukraine and a Russian presence, and what is that? Is that changing? Is it not as good? What is the culture towards that?
What's your company? Just curious. What type of, are you service, product, tech?
We're user interface. We own
Okay.
patents for the use of motion and gestures and multimodal heads-up display.
Yeah, we'll speak to that.
Love it.
I don't have an answer for that. I was just curious what the business was.
Well, legal answer, but let's start at the non-legal end. There's lots of people who innovate, and I do think the culture of respect, accepting the realities of a commercial world, are constructive when it comes to confidentiality agreements, dealing with know-how, etc. Leaving aside one's attitude to you're first in market or you're first to put this, moon shuttle, onto Mars, then you've probably got the right team, and really IP isn't going to help you anyway. But the reality is confidence is respected in England, and I think the courts are very open to it. I don't want to get any more legal than that. As far as intellectual property is concerned, as patents and copyright and designs, it's really timely you've raised this, because there's a big piece of law that's just come into play that is doing an awful lot to improve the protection of design, which actually is a theme Fred was touching on. So the answer to your question, as far as conducting business within the UK/EU, and most of the law is driven by Europe at that level, it's a very it's a constructive environment, I think, to protect innovation. It's my opinion.
James, do you want to maybe mention patent box a little bit?
When we began the conversation, we said, well, I just can't talk finance and law. I thought, well, I'm not going to talk finance and law. There we go. Okay, so so politically, the UK government wants to be a centre of innovation. So how do they achieve that? And one of the things they've been doing, and Amy who's a chartered accountant, very capable tax advisor in London, she's the one to talk to, but she would say, first of all, we've got a headline company tax rate of 20%. And before I lose anybody, this tax rate is really the lowest in the G7. And what the British government said is, we want people to have European and UK patents, and we want them to derive their revenues from those patents in the UK. And if they choose to do that, we will give them a 10% tax rate, which isn't today, it's actually being phased in over the next 3 years. But all's to say, a lot of companies have thought about that already, are thinking about it, or if they're setting up, structure themselves around that notion. So that's patent box.
Yes, Jeff.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
It's been a little while.
Oh my gosh, hi.
So I think for probably everybody on the panel that you've had experience doing this, if you're looking at an acquisition or acquiring a team that's currently working in London, or and then either expanding on that, hopefully you expect that everybody that's part of the team that you're bringing onto yours here in the States is a superstar and nothing needs to be changed. That's not necessarily always the case. Texas being a right-to-work state, it's very simple to sort of navigate those conversations. I was wondering if there's anything at a high level, eyes open going in when you're looking to add talent to your team, what that looks like in London, or you need to ask some people to leave. Is it a different sort of conversation than it is here?
Buyer's remorse is more, it takes more time and cost to deal with, right? So, making decisions in a really solid way, assessing that talent really well is critical. Now that's for any business, but contractually, employment agreements, contracts that people have, it can be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Even if you have them exit the business, you can have extra months where they're not even employed with you. They're on, I love that it's called garden leave. It sounds lovely. You're paying them basically to sit in the garden and not go work for one of your competitors, right? And so there's complication around that from a legal perspective. I would say going in and assessing that talent, it would be critical to really, and this again is for any company, really clear about what are the key drivers for success in your culture and your organization that are imperative, right? There's sort of, you have to have those, and what's coachable, right? And understanding the skill set, and where's the gap. So if you can take that talent and it's coachable and can bring them into your culture, of course that's always advantageous. The cost of hire is huge, right? And the cost of turnover is huge. But untangling a bad hire can be really quite expensive.
I just no. Just because Lou made a really important point about at the high level about his exposure to coming into the environment and going. It wasn't usual for companies in the UK who had employees to be given ownership in the company through equity. So building on that, there's a really interesting. You don't need to read any of this, of course, but for me it's interesting twist that the UK government basically said, if you start becoming an owner in a business, then effectively you can be invited to waive a lot of your rights so that the relationship is very aligned. It becomes I'm a part owner in this business, so this notion of employment related rights really shouldn't predicate being a business owner. So that area is one area that would be interesting for you.
It is actually really interesting, especially for a small organization. We actually looked at it when it came through to see if there was something we could use there, and given our size and kind of where the team was, it didn't make sense for us. But kind of stressing probably more than anything, especially like in the acquisition context, something else is finding that cultural connection. Where like I said, with Voucher Codes for us, we talk the same language, we work the same way. It's very sort of very much a startup sort of feel to it, and so they were working way longer than they had to be and doing things, and it just fit with us the way we work together. It is when you get to the point where you have to start moving somebody out of business, it can definitely be painful. Those provisions aren't fun, and paying someone on garden leave isn't fun either. It's also even for things here in the U.S. that you wouldn't even blink and just be like that. There was something happened, the employee did something inappropriate, harassment, you name it, and you would just walk them out the door, wouldn't even think twice. Even that can be a bit more challenging there. As an example, which over here I'm sure will enjoy, we had an employee somewhat recently decide to expose himself in the office at 10 p.m. at night with some coworkers. It was great. It was awesome. Lots of love notes about that. And even in that case, we had, there was a little bit of a dance we had to do, and it was to do an investigation and do some things which, in the U.S. you wouldn't even. The investigation would be like, did you see that? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the whole political thing there is not the same.
It is not. It definitely is not.
But it's not France, okay?
I don't know, it's worse.
Go onto the continent, there's still much more. I mean, it's still not as progressive as it needs to be, but it's even more complicated.
I would say it's like the halfway house between the States and Europe is the UK.
I think to answer your question though, there's complexity to it, but I think you guys could help really understand what is the cost of employment, right? So, what is the cost of talent here versus the cost of talent there, and some of the considerations.
Well, I mean, especially for tech, I think things have moved on quite a bit, maybe since you've been there, but hiring, firing in the UK, and correct me if I'm wrong, is pretty much the same as here for the first 3 years. It's a different process, but it's flexible. If it doesn't work out, some notable exceptions maybe, but so that's the case. And the other thing with tech, and probably depends on your business too, is that first of all, the base salaries are much lower than they are in San Francisco. Let me add, maybe in Austin they're not so bad either, but we did an impromptu presentation to Techstars in Boulder. One of the companies said, yeah, but it's, somebody made the comment, it's so expensive. But it's actually, the salaries are very affordable and the talent's available, as opposed to San Diego or someplace where you have to go to extreme measures to poach. So it's there. That's because the NHS is there, for
I
one
was just
thing.
gonna say,
You know, the healthcare is there, the option is there. Now, as you move up the food chain, you have a manager, an MD, it's typical they also provide private insurance, which is available too. So that's kind of advice we can give and James can give to tell you how to recruit successfully, which is the key point,
Yeah.
right? So, but you have great examples, like Google we worked with, they were looking to see where to put their search technology center for Bing. And it was Paris, London, and Munich, I think was the other choice. And the real key thing was the talent. You know, they wanted Google talent. They wanted it, in, you know, it was international, it stays there, and it's plentiful. And we won that project, as we call it, 140 people right out of the gates. So, I mean, it's there, it's available, and, you know, it's different, you know, but you have, it's part of the fun of going into an international market, right?
Do you see that prevalence of talent sort of across industries, so not just like in the technology sphere? You have developers, certainly you've got your engineers and whatnot, but you also have a requirement for designers. And
You do. London has had a massive design presence in the world for many decades, so it's one of the epicenters of design.
We actually find designers, we find it easier to find designers in London than we do in Austin.
Yeah.
Part of that's because we're trying to pull them from something out. Sure.
Is there a big difference between hiring an employee and a contractor? In here, there's a lot of difference.
Yes, and I'll be honest with you. I think at least in my experience, I mean, the rules are tighter. I think in the EU in general. I'm not an expert at it, but we've definitely put our foot in the water there, and it can be more challenging. The one thing we've had success with, and you know, James could slide me down if I go too far on this, but we've had some success starting people on a temporary contract, having them come in for a year or something like that, starting to get your exposure, and then deciding after that we want to put them on a kind of what they call a permanent contract, and having that person come in full time. So now there's a risk of loss there as well.
Given your story, I was going to say, make sure there's no exposure.
That's right.
First year.
Yeah.
Day 366, everything.
Well, good. Well, on that note, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're at the announced time for the event, so I think we're going to kind of end it there from this kind of a discussion forum, but we will continue the conversation for a little bit here over some cocktails in the proper European, British, and American tradition. So thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you to our Great. I encourage you to come and talk to everybody.